One of the things that I think we need to know about Jesus, one of the things that really can get lost in American Christianity, and one of the things that's immediately clear as we look into the scriptures is this. Jesus is not offering to us to be a small addition to our lives. He's not inviting anyone to kind of follow him. When Jesus invites us into relationship with him, to follow him, he's inviting us into something radical. Now, everyone has to start somewhere, and Jesus isn't expecting all of us to be all in the moment it's a process. But where we end up is intended to be something radical. And Jesus said stuff like this, and it's kind of shocking. He said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And we hear that and we're like, what? Hate your father and mother and your wife and your children. We just go, that doesn't sound like you, Jesus. What's up with that? And of course, in our culture, this kind of thing is very hard to understand because in our culture, it's marked by this tremendous religious tolerance. And in many ways, that is a really good thing. Because many of you are here from families where you come out of the family and it wasn't a Christian family. And yet it doesn't really prevent you or get in the way of you following Jesus. I mean, you think about it and you go, well, yeah, but I'm kind of persecuted. And what you mean by that is, your family teases you a little bit. Or they make the odd, rude comment. But for most of you, even if your family doesn't follow Jesus themselves, they still love you. They still want you to be a part of the family because we live in this culture of religious tolerance. Okay, now, but that is not the case for many people that have decided to follow Christ. Even today, if you were raised in a devout Muslim family in, say, Iraq, and you just waltz in one day and announce to the family, hey, everybody, guess what? I'm a follower of Jesus. Okay, your fear wouldn't be that they might tease you or make a rude comment. The fear would be that they would disown you. The fear would be that you're risking your own life. Now, for us, that's just foreign to us. But this has been the reality for many Christ followers. And it was, in fact, the reality of the very first Christ followers. They had to choose, many of them, between their family and Jesus. So, in context here, what Jesus is saying is not that we should all hate our families. He's simply saying that for people that are facing that kind of pressure, they cannot prioritize even their own family over following him. Love for Jesus needs to exceed even love for our family. And he goes on to say this in the next verse, verse 27. He says, and whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. In other words, sometimes following me might lead directly to suffering. You cannot follow me and be a true disciple if you're not willing to endure some really tough stuff. If comfort and safety are your ultimate priorities, then I can't be. So you're going to have to choose. To be my true disciple, you will have to follow me even if it leads you to discomfort, even if it leads you to pain, even if it leads you, get this, he says, to physical death. Now again, for us, following Jesus, we look at that and go, it's not going to lead to physical death. But for many Christ followers down through the ages and even across parts of the world today, this is reality. A few verses later, Jesus concludes with this. He says, in the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. He's saying nothing that you have is really yours anyway. It's all a gift from God. Okay, your time, every moment that you have, every time you take another breath, it is a gift from God. All the natural talents that you were born with, that you've been blessed with, they're all a gift from God. Your possessions, everything that you own, it's all a gift. Everything you have, Jesus is saying, it's a gift from God, and it belongs to him. So he's saying, if you're going to follow me, you have to be willing to lay it down in whatever way I ask. You have to be willing to lay down your time and your talents and your possessions. And if any one of those things becomes more important to you than serving me, you cannot be my disciple. Now he says, I promise you eternal life. I promise you entrance into God's kingdom. I promise you joy and beauty and life beyond anything you could ever imagine. But if comfort in this life is more important, you cannot be my disciple. And we look at sections of the teaching of Jesus like this, and we go, oh my goodness, this is radical. And when we think of it in this way and we realize how radical this really is, I mean, it's natural, right, for people to wonder, well, okay, if it could cost me everything, is it really worth it to follow Jesus? And Jesus paints a picture in Matthew 13, verses 44 to 46. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Or again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Okay, in other words, the person that begins to see the kingdom, the person that begins to understand what it is Jesus is really offering, that sees the beauty and the joy of what it is that Jesus is holding out. When a person actually begins to see that and really gets it, Jesus says they'd actually be willing to trade everything for it. Because in Jesus, there's a new kingdom. And he says it is beautiful. And it is worth giving everything to be a part of. But when we look around at like American Christianity, I think most of us would agree that it isn't very radical at all. And I don't know if, there's different polls that are done. One that I saw recently said that 75% of Americans self-identify as Christians. 75%. Now, call me crazy, but I just don't think that there's any way that 75% of America is radically following Jesus. And here's the problem with this pseudo-Christian culture that we find ourselves in. We're tempted to evaluate Christianity by what we see around us, right? So the non-Christian world decides whether it likes or doesn't like Christianity based on what it sees. Even though often what it's looking at isn't really Christianity at all. It isn't genuine, committed followers of Jesus. It's some watered-down substitute of the real thing. And then very often what happens is the world rejects that version. Being surrounded by pseudo-Christianity also affects believers. It also affects those that are trying to follow Jesus. Because what can happen is we lose sight of the real thing. And even we can become confused about what real faith looks like. And rather than letting the teachings of Jesus be our picture of faith, what we see around us then becomes our picture. And Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. But see, if we settle for some substitute form of the faith, the reality is we never enter into that life. We never actually experience that life. And so the only way that I know to avoid this whole mess is to stay absolutely fixated on what Jesus taught about genuine faith. Because our model for faith cannot be the surrounding Christian culture. It has to be. Okay, it has to be the teachings of Jesus. It has to be the pictures that he painted. And so this morning, I want us to look at something really radical that Jesus taught. Something that is absolutely core, absolutely foundational to authentic faith, to kingdom life, to kingdom living. And then I want us to look hard at ourselves and think deeply about whether or not as individuals and even as a church, we're embracing this. Now, Jesus taught that we are to love with a radical kind of love. And I'm going to read his words to you. And as I do, I just want you to sit back and really let his words sink in. Here's what Jesus said. This is Luke chapter 6, verses 27 to 36. He said, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies." Now, let that sink in. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full, but love your enemies. Do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind and to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Now, guys, is it me, or is that like radically insane? I mean, it's just so radical. It's so out there. It's so like, that's crazy. Jesus says to love people to not just love the people that love us, but Jesus says to actually love the people that hate us. Jesus says that when people are cruel to us, that we refuse to respond with cruelty and hatred in return. That instead we pray for them. That we start to ask God good things on their behalf. And Jesus says that we be generous even toward our enemies. And that we should be extremely giving to people that are cruel to us. And he says we should do it without expecting to get anything back from them in return. This is like a core idea of the Christian faith, right? This is not the first time we're hearing this. But think about that. Now, let me pause and ask, like, if 75% of Americans are Christians, like, is this really how 75% of our country lives? Like, I don't see it. Now, obviously, loving our enemies is hard. In fact, it's so hard that nobody does it perfectly. Nobody gets this right. Not all the time. But my question is, are 75% of Americans even attempting to do this? And again, I'd have to say, yeah, I don't think so. And here's why I think this is. It's because it's so radical. I mean, loving our enemies is so contrary to human nature. And when you think about it, in our culture, made up of 75% followers of Jesus, we glorify revenge. We glorify it. Like, returning hurt with hurt can actually be considered really cool. Now, I want to share an example of this that I have shared before. Some of you heard me talk about this before, use this example before, but get over it. A few years ago, I was in my car. This is quite a few years ago now. I was in my car, and I heard this really cool country song. And for those of you that know me, you know I'm not really a country fan. My daughter is, and I love her anyway. But this song, oh man, this song was rocking. This song, it was like on the radio. It was on like the regular radio, because I'm not listening to no country stations. It's on like the regular radio, so I'm listening to it, and I'm just like, wow. And I'm like, this is the first time I'm ever hearing it. I'm just like head bobbing. I'm grooving. I'm like, oh man, this song rocks, and this lady can really sing. So I'm grooving along to this thing, and then I started listening to the lyrics. And it's kind of a dark song. It's a song about revenge. Now, I would sing it for you, but you don't want that. And so I printed out the lyrics, and I'm going to read them to you, And as I read, let's see how many of you know this song. And if you know it, don't say it out loud yet. Right now, he's probably slow dancing with a bleach blonde tramp. And she's probably getting frisky. Right now, he's probably buying her some fruity little drink because she can't shoot whiskey. Right now, he's probably up behind her with a pool stick showing her how to shoot a combo. Oh, and he don't know that I dug my key into the side of his pretty little souped-up four-wheel drive, carved my name into his leather seat. I took a Louisville Slugger to both headlights, slashed a hole in all four tires. Maybe next time he'll think before he cheats. Right now, she's probably up singing some white trash version of Shania karaoke. Right now, she's probably saying, I'm drunk. And he's thinking he's going to get lucky. Right now, he's probably dabbing on $3 worth of that bathroom polo. Oh, and he don't know, that I dug my key into the side of his pretty little souped-up four-wheel drive, carved my name into his leather seat. I took a Louisville Slugger to both headlights, slashed a hole in all four tires. Maybe next time he'll think before he cheats. I might have saved a little trouble for the next girl, because the next time that he cheats, you know it won't be on me. No, not on me. Because I dug my key into the side of his pretty little souped-up four-wheel drive, carved my name into his leather seat. I took a Louisville Slugger to both headlights, slashed a hole in all four tires. Maybe next time he'll think before he cheats. Oh, maybe next time he'll think before he cheats. Oh, before he cheats. Oh. Okay, if you know, raise your hand if you know who sang that. Okay, on the count of three, shout it out. 1, 2, 3. Carrie Underwood. And the song is called Before He Cheats. Guys, did you know that is the 4th best-selling country song of all time? And you know why? Because it rocks, man. It sounds so good. And but I also think there's just something about that resonates with us on a human level. There's something deep within us that wants to say, oh yeah, baby, you go, girl. You let that cheating dog have it. Now, some of you may know that Carrie Underwood didn't actually write that song. Did you know that? And so you go, oh, well, it must have, clearly it was written by some female victim of infidelity, right? No, it was written by 2 men, Chris Tompkins and Josh Keir. And so for me, when I found that out, I'm like, I just have a hard time envisioning these 2 men sitting in a room like, oh yeah, that's good, dude. And by the way, Carrie Underwood also sang the hit, Jesus Take the Wheel. Anybody remember that? Raise your hand if you remember that. Now, I don't know, I'm thinking if Jesus is taking the wheel, you're probably not slashing tires and bashing headlights. And what's funny is those 2 songs are just a couple songs away from each other on the same album. I mean, how much of an emotional roller coaster is that? There's something in us, if we're really honest, that kind of likes the idea of revenge. There's something in us that takes a little pleasure in the idea of hurting back because it's just human nature. It's a part of us. And yet, Jesus says, do good to people that hate you. Bless those who curse you. And the thing is, it's like he really expects us to do this. he really expects us to live like this. Like, this was a topic that he just kept coming back to. He taught on it over and over and over and over. And, the disciples are probably like, can we move on to something else? He's like, well, have you got this one yet? Well, no. Okay. And he'd be with his disciples and he'd say, the world says when someone hurts you, you should hurt them back. But I'm telling you, not so with you. I want you to live differently. I want you to be different. I want you to love with a radical kind of love. I want you to love in a way that nobody loves. I want you to love even those that are mean to you. I want you to show kindness, to be generous toward people that are cruel to you. And guys, this was a really big deal to Jesus. And so I want to just spend the remaining moments thinking together about why that might be. And I just want to throw this out there. Maybe it's because this kind of love changes the world. Jesus said that when we pray, we should pray like this. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, where? On earth, as it is in heaven. Jesus said, when you pray like this. Pray that this world would become like heaven. Pray that your family would be a reflection of heaven. Pray that your workplace, that your neighborhood, your city, your nation, the world would begin to look more and more and more like heaven. But see, as long as we live in a world where people return hate with hate, this world will never, ever resemble heaven. And you think about what happens when people return hurt with hurt. You think about what happens in families, what happens in schools, what happens in workplaces. You think about what happens to friendships. Think about what happens between ethnic groups. Some of you have seen the movie Hotel Rwanda. Very difficult movie to watch, because it's a graphic portrayal of what actually happened in 1994. Close to 1 million people in Rwanda were killed in 6 months. Now I'm going to repeat that just because, like, what? Over 1 million people in Rwanda in 1994 were killed over a 6-month period. You know why? Because hate was returned for hate. One ethnic group had dominated the other ethnic group for a long time, and suddenly the power flipped, and it was return hate with hate. It escalated, and close to 1 million people died in 6 months. Jesus wants heaven to come to earth. He wants us to pray for that. But until somebody stops the cycle of vengeance and hatred, heaven will stay in heaven, and this earth will resemble hell. Jesus wants us to let go of what's natural to us, and he wants us to live differently. He wants us to live otherworldly. He wants it because if we can do it, it truly changes the world. Now, I think about our own country, and I think about the resentment that's come about because of the mistreatment of ethnic groups in our own country. It's crazy what's gone on here. And I think about how possible it would be for our nation to end up looking like Rwanda. I mean, it could happen in a heartbeat. But in our country, certain ethnic leaders have chosen another way. They have chosen the way of love and grace. Now, you think about the tensions between whites and blacks in our country. You think about what life was like for black folks in the 40s and the 50s. And you think about how much hatred was possible from all of that. You think about how much violence was possible from all of that. But there were many dynamic young Christ followers, one in particular, a young black Christ follower. And he could have preached a message of hate. In fact, in my opinion, when you think about it, he would have been more than justified to do so. But he took the words of Jesus very seriously. And he used his influence and his words to paint a very different picture. Now, here was the picture he painted. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right here in Alabama, little black boys, I love this picture, one day right here in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain and the crooked places will be made straight. That is a reference to the coming of the kingdom of God. And he says, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed and all flesh shall see it together. Because that's a vision that people bought into. And it changed our country. And Dr. King could have preached a message of hate. He could have incited people to act in violence. They were ready for it. And as much violence as there was and as much violence as there has been, it certainly could have been much, much worse. Without folks like Dr. King, who knows where we'd be? Now, today we live in a better country. And now, there is a long way to go. There's a long, long way to go. But I think if we look back over the last several decades, we are heading in the right direction. A great deal of healing has happened. But it's only happened as folks have let go of their desire to hurt back. It's only happened as courageous people have loved their enemies. The reason that Jesus is so serious about this, the reason Jesus wants us to be serious about this is because this kind of radical love actually does change the world. It changes families and broken friendships. It changes workplace environments, schools. It changes communities and it changes nations. Jesus was serious about this, dead serious about it, because it changes the world. But another reason Jesus was serious about this is because when we do it, it reflects God. Okay, when we love those that don't love us, we are reflecting the very heart of God. And Jesus wraps up this teaching on radical love with this. He says, but love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. Guys, God's heart goes out to those who don't love him. And thank God it does. He loves you and me even when we don't love him. You know, Jesus laid down his life for his enemies. I mean, even for those that were in the midst of executing him and mocking him and pouring it all on, he prayed, Father, forgive them. They don't really fully understand what they're doing. And here's the thing, when we love those that love us, like that's natural. When we're kind to people that are kind to us, that's natural. Like, even very wicked people do that. It's human, it's natural. But if we want the world to see Jesus in us, we have to be able to love those that aren't nice to us. We have to be able to somehow be kind to even those that are cruel to us. That's the kind of love that gets the world's attention. Some of you may remember the Amish school shooting back in 2006. A man named Charles Roberts broke into an Amish schoolhouse, and he executed 5 girls between the ages of 7 and 13. And then he turned the gun on himself. Now, those of you that have kids, try to imagine someone doing that to yours. I mean, imagine if someone did that to your child. The reports stated that most of the girls were shot execution style. Because so they were put on their knees and they were shot right in the back of the head. I mean, just cold-blooded. Janice Ballinger, deputy coroner in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, told the Washington Post in an interview that she counted at least 24 bullet wounds in one child alone before asking a colleague to come and take over for her. You think about that. Apparently the scene was too overwhelming even for a professional coroner. Inside the school, Ballinger, the coroner, described the scene. She said there was not one desk, not one chair in the whole schoolroom that was not splattered with either blood or glass. There were bullet holes everywhere, she says, everywhere. Now, obviously, if something like that happens, okay, the shooting made headlines. But the thing that made even bigger headlines, was the radical response of the entire Amish community. The Amish came together and decided that they were going to respond with radical love. The gunman, Roberts, he left behind a wife and children. People didn't see this coming. It was kind of out of the blue. He left behind a wife and children. And the world watched as the Amish, get this, the Amish reached out to Roberts' family. Within hours, an Amish person actually went to Roberts' home to console Roberts' shocked and grieving widow. Amish community members visited much of Roberts' extended family. One Amish man held Roberts' sobbing father in his arms for more than an hour to comfort his father. The Amish also set up a charitable fund for the family of the shooter. About 30 Amish community members attended Roberts' funeral. And Marie Roberts, the widow of the killer, was one of the few outsiders invited to the funeral of one of the victims. Marie Roberts wrote an open letter to her Amish neighbors. She wrote, "Your love for our family has helped to provide the healing we so desperately need. Gifts you've given have touched our hearts in a way no words can describe. Your compassion has reached beyond our family, beyond our community, and is changing our world. And for this, we sincerely thank you." I look at something like that and go, oh man. Now, I may not agree with the Amish stance on abstaining from technology. But man, their love for Jesus, it's radical. It's genuine. They're sincere and they are all in, and they get this love your enemies thing. And when the world was watching, as far as I'm concerned, and you can make whatever you want of it, as far as I'm concerned, they were heroes. The world watched and the world saw something radically different. And the question for you and me is simply this. When the world watches you and it watches me, what does it see? Does it see a radical kind of love? Because loving people that love us first, being kind to those that are kind to us, that's easy. But Jesus actually calls us to more. And so, what about you? Think about your family, your extended family. Think about your workplace. Think about your neighbors. The ones whose dog, and When people look at you, what do they see in you? How do you respond when you're not treated well? Are you somebody that God can use to break the cycle of hate for hate? Are you doing what you can to change whatever the world is around you? When you're mistreated and people are watching, are they seeing Jesus in you?